to Cooper Talk.
Welcome to Cooper Talk. I'm your host, Steve Cooper, and remember, I'm only as hip as my guests. And I got to tell you something, people. Joanne had her bridal shower this weekend, and I tell you, we got some really good stuff because I love to cook, and we got a new crock pot, we got a new convection toaster oven, we got an air fryer, which I'm looking forward to, and we got a really big food processor. But the two things that excited me the most were probably the least expensive of everything. One is this thing that you stick in a pineapple and you core it, and the pineapple comes right out. And that's why I don't eat pineapple, because it's always a pain in the butt to fix. But the best thing is a little wire contraption that holds taco shells. Now, I tell people I make my own tacos at home because since I moved back from LA, I was spoiled on tacos out there. Mexican food is in LA what Italian food is back east. But it's great because they always fall over. So it's the little things, as Maya said, that makes me happy. So anyway, it was a good weekend. We have a great show today. We have a gentleman who's a singer, songwriter, just an all-around cool guy. And my guest is Martin Page. How you doing, Martin?
I'm doing good, my friend. I've learned a lot about cooking by just listening to you there.
What's that?
I've just learned a lot about cooking. I'm just listening to you there.
No, you live in L.A. What was the difference for you? What's the difference for you when you moved from England to L.A. in food? Did you notice a big difference in food?
I suppose so. The thing I noticed the most was sun. We've been brought up in the rain. So coming to LA, it was like, oh, it's sunny every single day. And also, all the girls seem so much prettier. So I thought, this is where I have to stay.
Yeah, exactly. So I was doing some reading on you, and you traveled a lot as a kid, I believe. You moved around, your family moved around a lot?
Yeah, I did. My father worked for British Aerospace, so he was involved with the Harrier jump jet, and he brought that to America with British Aerospace, and NASA got involved with that. So my father was coming to America before I was, but every now and then I would come across and stay at the American air bases with him as a young lad. And that was usually down south, in South Carolina, and Beaufort, and Charleston, and Savannah, where the air bases were. And so I heard incredible amounts of great soul music in a lot of ways that put a big impression on me on bass playing, and I fell in love with those records. And really, I would imagine that was when my songwriting sort of started seriously, around the age of 16 or 17. But yeah, I was traveling around a lot with my father, so I was able to come to America and hear music early. Also, being an English lad, I was born in Southampton, but I eventually ended up going towards London, where most of the music and the publishers and the record companies were. So music actually led me wherever I had to go, I think.
Now, do you think, and I talk to a lot of people who have performed, who have moved around a lot as a kid, that it's sort of an outlet for them to perform, and now when they perform, it's easier because when you move around a lot, it's like an audition when you're a kid, if you go to a new school or go to new surroundings. Do you think that has helped you in the long run in your performing?
Yeah, it's a very interesting question, but I did so much collaborating with so many writers when I came to Los Angeles in the 80s. So I got a real quick apprenticeship in working with other people. I think that when I think about it now, it's when I was a really young lad, around 12 to 15 years old, I was playing soccer semi-professional in England. I was being signed to a professional team, Southampton. And in a lot of ways, I think that sort of prepped me, because I was in a team, I was the captain, and you had to communicate. So I think looking back now, my early history is being pushed towards soccer and being in those teams helps me when I had to work with so many musicians in Los Angeles. Yeah, it preps you for everything. I mean, collaboration through the 80s for me, because that's when I arrived in Los Angeles. I suddenly found myself in the rooms with all the people I idolized. So I was from England. I'd always studied American music, listened to Boss Skaggs, Doobie Brothers, The Tubes, Parliament, Funkadelic, everything. And then suddenly, and Earth, Wind and Fire, and suddenly in the 80s, when all the music changed into synthesizers being used, I arrived here with my band and we were using synthesizers, and I was allowed to go into the studios with my idols and write with them. So yes, I think you have to have a great awareness of how to read rooms, how to be with certain musicians and certain people. So it was a wonderful apprenticeship for me.
Now, what made you choose bass. And, you mentioned, you listened to some of the early music, and I know you were a fan of Genesis and of some other bands. Was it the bass that you caught? Was it like you hearing, a bassist playing, you went, I want to do that? Or what made you attracted to the bass? Because a lot of times when kids are younger, they're very attracted. Well, everyone wants to be the lead singer, but then they're attracted to the lead guitar or the drums because they just want to beat on stuff. And I always say a bass player, like the bass and the drums, and I'm a big baseball fan, it's like the middle infield. Without them, your team's falling apart. But a lot of people don't gravitate towards the bass. What made you choose the bass?
Everything you say there really resonates with me because a rhythm section, the bass, I always saw the drummer and the bass player as the foundation of anything that was going to be really quite special. Also, I was very attracted to be the drummer and a lead guitarist, as we all were, but when I tried it, I thought, not really very good at this. Maybe I should do something else. What's got 4 strings? Okay, a bass. But as I said to you before, I was in America at an early age, and I used to hear, but really when the bass guitar was really coming into the fore of music, Brothers Johnson, Graham Central Station, Verdi and White with Earth, Wind and Fire, I was hearing this on the radio, and suddenly bass guitarists were up front, and you had people like Bootsy Collins and Stanley Clarke becoming gods and heroes of their instrument. And I just had a natural ear for bass on records. So if I heard a Motown record, I'd gravitate straight to what I would call the legs of the song, the heart of the song. I would hear the pulse beat. Actually, the sexuality of the song to me was always what was underneath and what felt solid. And there's so much harmonic coming from a bass that is really centering where the songs are going to go that I just fell into that place where bass guitar became very, very important to me. Very sexy guitar. It was that time. Of course, as a young lad, there was the Beatles when I was in the 60s. So I was very aware, probably subconsciously, that Paul McCartney was playing some incredible bass lines. I seem to have had an all-round kind of education because at that same time I fell into, a little bit later, in love with progressive music and Squire's bass playing with Yes and Mike Rutherford with Genesis. So I just sort of honed in on that core of what I thought music was about. Even if I'm listening to a classical concert, I'm listening to the cellos and I'm listening to the low end. It just seems to resonate so much more in me and can be exciting bass because, as we know, in the 70s, the bass players were becoming very percussive and slapping. So suddenly the bass guitar was a drum as well. And then you go into the more melodic places, as we said, with some of the great work from the progressive bands and Yes. So bass became my love, and still to this day, I'm attracted to it and still trying to get better on it.
Well, now you mentioned earlier you were the captain of the soccer team, and it seems like, that's like an American kid being the captain of the football team. It means you're good. Now, was it?
I suppose so. Yeah.
Was it hard for you?
Or you've got the loudest mouth on the field. That's probably it too.
Now, was it hard for you to? I mean, what made you choose music over soccer? Did you? because they're both long shot careers. I mean, it's your parents. Parents don't go, oh yeah, my kid want to be a musician and a pro athlete. They're probably like, why can't he just say he can be a salesman? I mean, what made you what made you stop soccer? Did you just think you had a better run for your music?
Well, I was born in a lower middle class in Southampton, so it was a council estate where all the kids basically were turned on by Top of the Pops music on TV or playing sport, football, soccer, and it was a way of escaping out of that lifestyle, which would have been me working down the docks as a stevedore. That's really what happened to us in secondary school, and so a huge attraction to escape the normality and the greyness of that kind of life was really pop music, which we saw on TV and we felt, and running out in the field and playing soccer. So from about 10 years old till 17, I was playing very serious soccer, and I absolutely was addicted to it. I was lucky to be signed to Southampton as a semi-professional. I played for my county. I became captain of the teams, played for South of England schoolboys. So everybody thought that's what was going to happen. I was going to be a soccer player. And then around the time of 17, when I was traveling around with the team, going to London and everything, I found myself in the evening in these clubs, in London, and I started to hear Motown. And, you know, like every kid at that time, I was dancing and looking for the girls, and we would play the soccer, then go to the clubs after. And slowly, everything I heard with music became very magical to me. It became like, this will go on forever, where soccer probably won't. You know, you're over at 27, you're over at 26. But with music, you know, it's forever. It's what's in your heart and what's in your brain. And you don't have to rely on the physical side of things quite as much. So I sort of realized I wasn't going to be a brilliant soccer player, and suddenly Motown and great music and clubs took me over, and I just thought, this is where the magic is. You know, I'd be playing soccer for the team, and then I'd be longing to go to the clubs after so I could hear some new music, you know, and feel the pulse of music. So around the age of 17, music seemed to me to be a long-lasting magic, and soccer didn't quite hold me past that point.
Now, when did you personally start playing the bass?
I was a late starter, really. I suppose around 17 and 18, very late for a musician. Yeah, but I tended to just buy so many records. I was a huge record collector. I was an addict for buying 45 vinyl records, you know, the singles, and then the albums. And so around 17, with a vengeance, I just bought a bass guitar. My parents helped me get a bass guitar, and I sat in my bedroom for 4 years just playing every single record I ever bought, you know, from a T-Rex record to The Who to early Genesis to, you know, funk and Stax and Rufus Thomas. I would just sit there and just put the headphones on and play bass to it and try and figure out what I was hearing on the record. So around 17, I became an absolute record-aholic. I was just buying everything every week and playing, learning it on the headphones, just sitting on the edge of the bed and trying to play. In a lot of ways, I felt like I was in each band that I rehearsed to. I thought, now I'm in The Who, now I'm in the Beatles, now I'm in Genesis, now I'm in Funkadelic. It was a great way for me to learn. I learned totally by ear and just by records. Now,
looking back, do you think? Well, you know, you've done well, so it doesn't make a difference. But do you wish sometimes that you had taken lessons, or do you think you learned so much more because you were just listening and learning it on your own?
It's a great question, mate. It's a great question. Hard to tell. You know, there's a real thin borderline between knowing too much and being excited by what you don't totally know, but you instinctively feel. In my heart, I think I'm happy that I had to fight through not knowing much and having to learn, you know, what tuning was, what scales were, what how to record in the studio. I had to learn everything just through enthusiasm. And in some ways, I think that if I'd known too much, I might have been more organized and more like, this is the way it should be done. So in my heart, I think you have to, as you experiment, you learn anyway. And if you're mixing with tons of musicians and tons of producers, you just go, oh, I didn't know that. You know, I've been doing it this way. But I think what broke me through and made me have this certain amount of success in all ways was my enthusiasm and my just turned on by the magic. And so you know, it's just like a kid when he gets his first guitar. There's something incredible about that. If you organize that too much and make it a machine, you know, make it something that isn't magic, it doesn't actually become fun, and you don't really sort of move on. So I think you learn as you go, but I think personally for me, the work I had to do to bring my standard up and to learn made a big difference to me. I was always a little bit free with my writing, always a little bit free with my musicianship. And I think in a lot of ways that is the spark that you get on some individual things. That's the spark you don't want to lose.
So you're getting good, you're teaching yourself. When do you decide to sit there and say, I'm putting a band together?
I think I wanted to put a band together when I was 3 years old. You know, I mean, I was just, you know, the moment you get your first guitar and you can't even tune it up, you go, I need to be in a band. And yeah, it's you know, it starts right from the beginning. I was in some really god-awful bands in Southampton trying to play drums, trying to play guitar, trying to play anything. But you just wanted your mates around you. So I think it takes a little bit of time after you sit on the drums and go like, oh my God, I'm no good, but you've got four mates around you. So there's a lot to do with camaraderie and friendship. I've always wanted to be in a band. It's only the later years, after I'd had a certain amount of success as a writer, that I started to concentrate even more on solitary writing and trying to develop my personal writing skill. But right from day one, when you see the Beatles on TV and you see this little gang, you want to be in that gang immediately. That's what you want, probably more than even learning the music. You just want to be in that gang.
Now, Q-Feel, you had some success with. How did you come up, how did you guys get together, and then how did you decide what music you're going to play? Because it was back then the synthesizer was big.
Yeah. Well, it was in the early 80s, and I was in a rock band playing live in London, and we were touring around, and I had to audition to find some guitarists in this band. I'd been made musical director, and at that time in this rock band, I found Brian Fairweather, a Scottish guitarist who came down to London to audition. We really hit it off. There was some magic between us, and we're still working together now. There was something that really connected, and even though this rock band I was in London called CMB was doing a little bit of business, I thought the success here is if we get a record deal ourselves, me and Brian, we have to concentrate on our songwriting. So we just became real partners. We became like the Baghetti and Musker, the Holland Dozier, Holland and McCartney and Lennon in our heads. We just thought it's going to be unison. He's a great guitarist. I can handle the bass. We sing a little bit. We'd have to get ourselves a 4-track, get into a little house and write some demos and then get a publishing deal. We didn't even know if we needed to get a record deal first or a publishing deal. We just thought if we're lean and mean, two of us, and we write great songs, well, then we can form a band around the songs if we get signed. And Q-Feel came around that time when all the music was changing. There was Ultravox, there was Thompson Twins, there was Tom Dolby specifically influenced us a great deal. But as you can hear from our first Q-Feel single, which I think sold 5 copies in Paris and nowhere else, I think we were doing reggae ska music, and then that didn't do anything. Within about 10 minutes, we said, no, we're a synthesizer band. And we got very attracted to this whole mystery of synthesizers. I mean, we really suddenly thought In the Age of Wireless by Tom Dolby was just so magical. It was like a magical mystery tour for us with synthesizers that we thought this is where it's all going. And more you were getting the New Order, the Ultravox, the Thompson Twins, and we thought, this is speaking to us, We put down our guitars and put down our basses, even though we knew we could get around that, and we just concentrated on getting a little Casio keyboard, a little 4-track, maybe a very small Roland keyboard, and we did these demos. One of those demos in the 80s was Dancing in Heaven, Orbital Bebop, and we took that to the record company, and although we were a ska reggae band, they went like, they've changed. They're now electric. And we put that single out. Again, it didn't do anything in Europe, but it did really well in America, and it took off in LA here on K-Rock, the big radio station here. That brought me here with Brian, and that single, Dancing in Heaven, led to all the American artists that we worked with after that, and I worked with, showing interest in us. It was almost the passport into LA. That record did a great deal for me. It was a very, very kind record to me.
No, you say when they showed interest. So, the record, people just took notice and said, did they want to did they want to collaborate with you because of your writing? Or...
Yeah, it really was the sound. This was a revolutionary sound in the 80s. When Brian and I came into town, although we loved Joni Mitchell and we loved the Eagles and everything, it was changing. And you could see that all the record companies in LA, and I was very prepared to walk into all the doors of the record companies here. I'd done my homework. And every record company I got in through the door and started to talk to them, they were very interested in the way Brian and I saw our music. And the charts were beginning to get dominated by this new sound. We were in town and we knew a bit about it. And so all the A&R men at the record companies put us with the people that wanted to change their sound. You had like Kim Carnes wanted to change. You had Earth, Wind and Fire that wanted to change. You had the Commodores wanting to change because this was a revolution in synthesizer music. And so I think even though our songs, there's no doubt you have to be able to write good songs, but at the same time, the sound we were making, the sound, you know, we were definitely using drum machines. We were definitely pushing the edges of production in those days. And so, yeah, if we had crap songs, I don't think the A&R men would have probably given us a light of day. But a few of the songs we had, they went like, if we could get this kind of sound with our artists, which are a little bit stuck in the mud, you know, the sound is changing. They were brought up on I'm saying the artists at that time were still brought up on acoustic guitars and guitars in general. But here was this other thing where suddenly synthesizers were going to be, and still are now, as we can see in the charts. 80s was a very, very seminal change in music. I believe our songs were strong, otherwise the A&R men wouldn't have seen the light of day. And in fact, you know, the songs I wrote at that time, We Built the City and These Dreams, were synthesizer demos, and they, in a way, Steve, I was thinking they might be from my own band, Q-Feel, but luckily other artists recorded them at that time in their own way, and the rest is history.
Yeah, I was going to say, well, you know, you're sitting out in L.A., and We Built the City and These Dreams, you get paired up with Bernie Taupin, which, if you love music, and we all loved Elton John, we all had Saturday Night's All Right for Fighting. We loved that song. It was that one greatest hits album where he's wearing the white suit on the top with the hat. And now, for you, that has to be a little bit, well, it's a huge honor, but it has to be a little bit intimidating to be working with a guy who has put out hit after hit. I mean, how did that collaboration between you two start?
Well, again, it's that same thing I just said. You know, all the record companies wanted their artists to change their sound, and some of the publishers wanted their writers to also become turned on and move into a new area. So I was at Bernie Taupin's publishing company, Chapel Music, playing some stuff, and they said, would you at all be interested in writing with Bernie Taupin? You know, he's not working much at the moment. He's not really with Elton, and we'd like to get him involved in something fresh. And, of course, as you just said, I grew up on Elton John, so Goodbye Yellow Brick Road is is an album that I put in the top 5. I'm a huge fan of Elton, so when this got put forward to me, I was like, how strange, this is ridiculous. How am I catching up with Bernie Taupin and Elton John? I do believe Elton is one of the most underrated popular songwriters of all time. But really, if we talk about this question, Steve, it's mainly that they wanted Bernie to try something new. He wasn't working with Elton that much, and so his publisher just said, "Would you fancy that?" Well, I met up with Bernie. Yes, it was like meeting, you know, one of the people that you'd grown up studying. You know, and I always knew that Bernie Taupin was an amazing. I knew subconsciously that what I heard with Elton was that these lyrics were coming from another place altogether. Well, we met in a restaurant. We sort of laughed together. No big deal. I think he was a bit tentative of working with me because I was a new kid in town, and of course it wasn't anything like Elton's music. So he said, "Let me send you 2 lyrics, and we'll test it out." Now, as you know, Bernie writes words ahead of time, and I'd never done this before, where you just take the lyrics and write it. But I took to it like a duck to water. It was beautiful. The words were there, and off I went. The first 2 lyrics he sent me were "We Built This City." Came through on my fax machine, and then another song called "Boys in the Mist." That was eventually became "These Dreams." "Boys in the Mist" was a song he tested out on Stevie Nicks of Fleetwood Mac. He didn't take it, and he gave me this and just said, "Run with it, see what you feel." I bought myself a little 8-track Fostex home tape machine, and I went to work on those 2 songs. And in the bridge of "Boys in the Mist," there was a lyric called "These Dreams," and I was very nervous to ask Bernie, but I called him and said, "Do you mind if I move These Dreams in to be the chorus? How do you feel about that?" And he hadn't even heard what I was doing. He said, "No, Elton does that all the time, so go for it." So the first 2 songs we wrote were those 2 songs. I mainly wanted to impress Bernie so that he wanted to work with me again. And the 2 demos I did are very modern sounding for that time, very synthesizer oriented. I saw "These Dreams" as like a orchestra maneuvers in the dark song, and I saw "We Built the City" actually for my own band. It was, you know, a much darker demo I did, very, very, very funky, a little bit different to what Starship eventually saw it as. But those were the 2 things that started us off. But to answer your question, I think even publishers wanted their writers that were ensconced in Los Angeles to change their ways. So as a young writer coming into LA, they wanted to throw me with different people to see if there were any of this new spark going to come about. That's how that began.
Well, now, when We Built This City, when you guys wrote it together, you gave it to Starship. Did they tweak it, as you said? I mean, did they tweak it and change it a little for what they wanted? And did you have input of that, or once they got the song, you guys weren't in the picture anymore?
Well, no, it was thrilling because Bernie and I had written these two songs, and suddenly they were circulating around LA, and the phone began to ring. You know, I think the Motels wanted to do We Built the City at the beginning. There was some rumor of that. Kim Carnes wanted to do These Dreams. There was a lot of activity. I was like, I think a lot because it was they were interesting songs, but there was Bernie Taupin's name there as a lyricist. So Starship, yes, they took the song. I was working with their producer, Peter Wolf, at that time, doing Earth, Wind and Fire and Maurice White's solo record, and Peter used to always ask me for what I had new. So I gave him a cassette of We Built the City and These Dreams. And then he was about to produce Starship, so he called me and said, we're going to do this song. I went, really? You know, I mean, I didn't think Starship would be in, but he was trying to change their sound somewhat. My chorus didn't keep repeating "We Built the City," so they called and they asked us if they could extend the chorus. You know, we built the city on rock and roll. We built the city on rock. They wanted to extend it, and we said, well, this is our first ever cut with me and Bernie, and we agreed to it. We changed the percentages slightly on the writing so that it was mainly me and Bernie, but they tweaked the chorus to extend it. And off it went, you know. They called me down the studio to hear it because they were so excited. They really thought they had a big record there. And I was so used to my demo, which was extremely funky and more Peter Gabriel in its vibe. I remember standing there and being thrilled that Bernie and I had a major cut, but still not thinking I liked it. I thought it was too Germanic and stiff. And so I was thrilled we got a cut, but I didn't really see it how I imagined it being. Of course, you know, over the years it's become this thing, and so I've got to understand it and love it for what it is. And I'm very proud of how long it's made its mark. But yes, they tweaked it with These Dreams. They basically copied the demo totally when Hart did it. If anything, they did it even more simpler than my demo was because I'd made it a bit more sort of orchestra maneuvers and more production. So I think in those days, Steve, you're just happy that first two things I did with Bernie, everybody was calling and saying, can we record it? Recording Starship. They were so enthusiastic that they had a huge record on their hands. I didn't really know, you know. They were like, if we extend this chorus, would you mind? And I was like, no, we're just happy to go. I didn't really. We were just happy to get the ball rolling. That's how that happened. And then off it went, you know. And within about 4 weeks, it was top of the charts. But even on my demo, which was on We Built the City, which was much more experimental, you know, I tuned into a radio just randomly and got that police report on the song, and I thought, well, that's better than the solo. That's more modern. Let's just put a policeman talking on the record. And then they eventually used a DJ, you know, on the record the same way I'd done it with a police report of a riot going on in LA, and they changed that DJ's comment to every city in America, so whenever that radio went out. So it looked like it was going to be destined to communicate on a huge level, which it did.
It became such a huge hit. Now, as the writer for that, there's royalties. You got to sit there and think that your life is changing.
Yeah. It's unreal, really, Steve. I mean, you're as I said before when we started this interview, you're thrilled and you're naive at the same time because you're doing something you love, and then all of a sudden, within 6 months, I had 2 number ones in America. It started to bubble. We'd hit the top 40, Brian and I, with Kim Carnes. My song started to bubble and start to make moves, but with me and Bernie, we sat down for 6 months and had 2 number ones. It was really quite unreal, and your life changes, but at the same time, you're still, you're you are the same creature. You are the same person who still writes 30 songs that nobody likes, and you write 2 that they do. You just carry on, and then all of a sudden you think, I'm good at the moment. I'm beginning to get the feel of this, and I'm beginning. And you know, with Bernie, particularly, it was half of my job was already done. I mean, the lyric was there. I played it, put it on the piano, played it, did it on the synthesizers, not always knowing exactly what Bernie meant, as Elton did. But you do it because you, not because you think you're going to be number one. I never have. I've never written to have in a lot of sense, to hit the charts. I mean, I like to keep that awareness. So, you know, some of the best songs that you really put all your heart into don't see the light of day, and some that you may not have felt as strong about, they start to do very, very well. So I think it's just, your life changes, but in some kind of way, I'm sure many other writers and performers would say it, you don't really feel you've changed, because your love is to still go in the studio the next day and write another song. You know, you don't stop and go, there we are, all done, lovely. You're moving on all the time, because it's your love, it's your desire, and you're addicted to it. Yes, life did change, and you suddenly, phone starts to ring, and people will send cars to pick you up and things. So you go like, something's changed, and it's a beautiful thing, because all your life you're working to make maybe 1 or 2 or 3 songs, let people know that this is what you do, and in a lot of ways, those hit songs allow you more freedom, you know, as you work with people, and you get more respect. But really, in my heart, I don't think I've ever changed. You know, it's lovely, and you feel it, you get a tingle, but it's still quite unreal, you know.
Well, it's, you know, We Built the City was so big, and then it got parodied, I believe, in England.
Yeah, it did. It did. I had my first number 1 in England at Christmas last year. Yeah, I just couldn't believe it. It's been three generations of people have made this song a massive hit. In England, it was number 1 parody by a I think his name was Lad Baby, and he's a YouTube celebrity. And he did this single for a charity, and he changed... my music wasn't changed at all. I mean, they basically copied the music, but they did change the lyrics to "We built this city on sausage rolls." And I went like, usually, because "We Built the City" gets cut a lot for movies and adverts and things. My manager sent it to me just before Christmas and said, "Do you agree with this?" And I said, "If Bernie does, I do, because they haven't changed my music, it's down to Bernie." Well, Bernie went with it, and I didn't think much of it at all. I just thought, well, that's cute. And then a cousin of mine suddenly said, "Do you see that you're just about to go number 1 in England?" And I just couldn't believe it, you know. And, you know, the Christmas number 1 in England is always a huge thing. It's very, very special to England. They do betting on it. They take it very serious. It's written down in the Hall of History for England. You know, that all the number 1s at Christmas in England are sort of stamped into a gold platter kind of thing. And suddenly on the day of Christmas Day, everybody in England, and I saw some incredible film of people, you know, around the Christmas table singing "We Built This City." I mean, it was, and it was, you know, my first number 1 in England. "We Built the City" had been top 20 something like 2 or 3 years ago. Before that, with an advert for a telephone company, and before that, I think it reached 12 with Starship, like 30 years before. So it's very strange to have a number 1. You know, 30 years again later, and that it's all young kids that are 4 or 5 years old singing your song. They're even singing "We Built the City" at soccer crowds in England in the Premiership, and that was a big deal to me because I grew up through soccer. But and in England, it hasn't got "We Built the City" hasn't got the notoriety of what it got here, with everybody trying to pan it and say Starship selling out and all that stuff. In England and in Europe, they look at it as just as a song for what it is. So I was incredibly proud that 30 years later, it went number 1 again, and I felt very blessed to be able to see that over 3 generations, that song has touched young people every time it's come around. So very proud of that.
Well, now as a musician, and it's, you know, you had, you know, your own songs back. I mean, you eventually did some solo albums, but when these songs were coming out and Starship was hitting it, and then These Dreams was hitting it, was there something inside you that said, you know, I should have recorded this myself, or was that never in question?
Yeah, it was there. You know, it's funny. obviously I started in a band with Q-Field, but then when I came to LA, I just thought, this is fantastic. Everybody likes my songwriting, and there's a lot to learn here. I want to be a very good songwriter. I want to be an all-rounder. I want to be able to write lots of different kinds of music. And after we built the city in these dreams, some great English bands came to work with me. Go West from England, and we wrote King of Wishful Thinking and Faithful together, and I did some work with Paul Young, and it was lovely, because I thought, this, I'm touching my R&B, I'm touching my pop roots, I'm still able to do deeper stuff if I want to. And around that time, I was also put with Robbie Robertson of the band fame when he was making his solo record, and again, I was put with him to sort of, I think, modern up the day and all that stuff. And I wrote Fallen Angel with him, which Peter Gabriel sang with him on. And during that period with Robbie Robertson, I would be bringing in my demos for him when I was trying to prepare ideas for him. And he just kept on saying to me, you've got a sound in your voice. You've got something to say. And I sort of put that on the side, really, anything solo, because I was enjoying my life, and it was very busy writing for everybody and learning. And he said, look, you really need to make a solo record. Well, my manager also, Diane Poncher, had been saying, there'll be a time when you want to do it. I think by working with Robbie Robertson and with Earth, Wind and Fire at the same time, Maurice White, both of them, Maurice White and Robbie, sort of pushed me towards saying, you have something to say, and you need to do something for yourself. So seeing Robbie Robertson doing his album with Daniel Lanois at the Village, and just being concentrating on that, I put a major studio in my garage and decided to make a record at home and to do it the way I wanted. I was old in the tooth. I wasn't a young guy coming out, so I already had that kind of experience, and I knew what I wanted to do. I wanted to write a very spiritual record, and from that I wrote an album called In the House of Stone and Light and signed to Mercury Records, and that song did very, very well for me back then in the 90s. I was encouraged to do that, and I did it on my own terms. I knew I wanted to do a record that felt like me, and not, here comes a songwriter, he's going to make his record and try and have a few hits. I was determined, because of my work with Maurice White and Bernie Taupin and Robbie, to make a record that I thought, it's me. This is what I pull off well. This is how I sing. I care about this. It has Gaelic. It has folk. It has funk. It has all these different things which I love. And I could, for the first time, write lyrics that I really cared about, which were about restoration of your spirit and your soul. I needed to do that. I needed to write about the ups and downs of life from the South. You may only get one chance to make a record. Do it on your own terms and don't get manipulated. I was lucky. The record company stayed away from me. They didn't hound me. And I was able to put out the album I wanted. Quite surprised at the single. Well, it took a year, but it became huge, the actual single from the album. And I was very fortunate, Steve, on that album to have all the people that I'd helped in the past as a songwriter. So Phil Collins played the drums. We had a great Scottish band called Blue Nile. PJ, the keyboard player, he got involved. Great guitarist Bill Dillon that I'd met with Robbie Robertson. Russell Broom that I'd met on the road playing. Jack Hughes and Wang Chung. Everybody came around me to help me with these songs, and I made it at home. And that led me on from that point on to still put out my solo records, even on my own label now, my own small little independent label. I still continually like to put out my own books, my own albums. I'm still a creature of that era from the 70s when people made albums, and I see them as little books. I see them as movies. And so from around the 90s on, I was allowed to make a solo record, and they can't stop me still doing it. So I'm off. I'm still doing it.
Now, were you still writing for other people when you were doing your solo album?
I was, but not as much. It takes quite a bit of focus to make solo records, and I felt a little bit luxurious in the sense that I'd done well with these hit records, and I felt like if ever there was a time I could concentrate on what I really wanted to write for myself, what I really cherished. It sounds corny, but I wanted to do much more intimate and personal records, and I wanted to write my own lyrics. I wanted to sing in a certain way. I did every now and then write with other people when it felt right, but also what was quite fascinating to me is my my own little solo record called In the Temple of the Muse that I put out on my own label, good 10 years after House of Stone and Light. It got cut. 4 songs on that album got cut by other people, which was just really quite encouraging to me. Robbie Williams did a song called The Long Walk Home, and we had Starship again did a song called Everything You Do, Karma. They cut that for their greatest hits. And Elaine Page cut a song called Me Morena, as did Josh Groban. And I thought, how strange, I'm not running these songs, I'm not pushing anymore, but people were hearing my solo records and these little independent things I would do at home, and I'm still able to get some lovely cuts from them. So yeah, it sort of carried on, not as quite as intense as I was, where the door was always swinging every day in the studio and somebody else would be coming in to work with me. I did tend to focus after House of Stone and Light much more on what I wanted to say, and I felt the luxury, because of the other hits, to say, well, I don't always need to have that. I now have a little bit of a bed of security to try and make my own strong solo records.
Now, but between your solo records, there's a lot of time. What did you do in that time?
I don't know. Yeah.
I mean, it's like you look at your thing, I go, wait a second. I mean, I know you're still writing, but it's like, didn't you have a burning inside to sit there after, in the House of Stone and Light, to sit there and go, man, I want to record another album. I mean,
well, I actually did, Steve. I actually jumped straight in and I recorded. Actually, what became In the Temple of the Muse, I had Me Morena and a few other very strong songs building. And actually, Mercury Records came to me to hear the next record, and they were like, "This is great, fantastic. Off you go, keep going." And then Mercury Records folded, and all the funding was out of anything they were recording then, and they dropped major artists all in a row, even though they had said, we want this to go on. There was a major change. So I just thought, this is what it is to be with a major label. You don't know where you are. I mean, my A&R man had been fired 2 years before. The main executives of Mercury, every time they came to see me, it was somebody different. And so I just thought, that's tough. That wasn't enjoyable. I just recorded half of a new album and everything just stopped. I could have had the greatest album of all time there, and because of politics, I wouldn't have a chance to get it out. Luckily, I think I was reminded at the time, like 10 years later, I did piece it all together again and actually start to put out. I put that record out 10 years later. The 10 years in between that, I carried on working, but I thought, I don't enjoy the politics of this, and I'll write for other people, and I'll tinker away. And I think also I wanted to feel a little bit about what life was without me continually sat in the studio all the time. I thought, well, if there's ever a time for me to take a step back, my parents were passed away during that period after House of Stone and Light. That was major to me. And I thought I need a little bit more development as a human being. I'm always sat in the studio plugging in a guitar. I'd like to travel. I'd like to read some more books. I'd like to feel something that isn't just the next song. I've never been a person, thank God, that has not been able to write a song a day kind of thing. And that, after a while, it's wonderful, but at the same time you go, oh, I've been doing this for 20 years. And there was that time, and I'd let go a little bit of saying, oh, there'll be another record, who cares? I've done a really good job, and I'll see where everything goes in the future. Then, with digital coming in, and everybody saying you can fund this yourself, you can put your albums on CD Baby, you can have your own label. A lot of the young engineers that were working with me and had been on the road with me said, why don't you do this? It's easy. And I said, that can't be that easy. But they said, it is. And so, yes, that 10 years, it seemed like 5 years to me. I put out another record. And now I've been very fortunate to put out a record nearly every year. And I've been able to do the kinds of things I want to with those albums and change my style and whatever. But it was a long time in between that period, but I would probably put it down to now a time of reflection, which I hadn't done for 20, 30 years before that. I was always working.
Well, now, you said during that time your parents passed away. It was very hard on you. You traveled. Did you feel in that time when you were, before your next album, which you already had half of, did you feel that your writing style was changing?
that's a really hard question. It's a great question, but it's a hard question. Things change. I'm very fortunate to have been doing, 40 years of writing. It's not many. If we look back to artists in their prime, they don't get this length of time. I think I'm very grateful to see a song I wrote 30 years ago still go number one in England 30 years later. So I'm very aware of the mortality here. But songs, I think you do change, isn't it? I think you do. I mean, vocally, your emotions change. You have to be... I was recently working with Ray Parker again from Ghostbusters days, and we were both saying, it's not easy to get your tempos up, to get the energy going, because we've settled into this mid place of beauty. I know for myself, as a songwriter, I became more aware of harmonic and chordal and melodic sense as I went into the end of the 90s, and I sort of stayed in that place where I really wanted to feel very, very close to emotion. And also, best way I could sum this up is you change in what you listen to a great deal. In the later years, I was beginning to understand classical much better. I was beginning to understand jazz better. I was beginning to feel other things, which was very exciting because, when you're a kid, you're locked into one thing, it's a big buzz, and then you get to doing it for 40 years and you start saying, well, what else is there for me to turn me on? And that led me towards experimental music, jazz, classical. And I started to find a whole new way of listening to music around that time. I think you do change. I think you do change. But every now and then, when you write something, you go, "Oh, that's me. That's me. That's me. That's definitely where I come from." And I think as you get older, you have to, like any discipline, maybe push yourself in some areas where you're beginning to become a little bit blind in, or beginning to to slow down on. So you have to say, need to listen to more what's happening now, need to understand more technology, need to hear what's really buzzing now, need to go deeper into music. So I do think you change. Obviously your voice changes, your octaves come down and you sing differently. My range is not as high, but I'm much more a richer and an emotional singer than I've ever been. So you sort of, yes, you mold, you change, and I think if you want to be still revere your art, I think you've got to stay on top of yourself even more as you get an older songwriter. You have to say, we need to be charged up here. What's going on? We can't settle into something that is easy. We need to challenge ourselves a little bit. And I do try to challenge myself a bit because I'm quite aware of how we physically, mentally change over the years. Some things are for the better, and it's amazing. I've written more emotional music that I never thought I could have accomplished ever. Some of my songs now I couldn't have written when I was 21. And some of the songs I wrote when I was 23 and 25, I couldn't write now. But there is a stream that is you that runs through everything.
Now, for you these days, because they said, when you were when you wrote those songs with Bernie, he would send you, the chorus, and you would do the music. When you write now, do you do the music first, do you do the lyrics, or do you do them together?
It all comes in absolutely different ways. I've often thought about that. Comes in very, very strange ways. In general, I tend to sit down at a keyboard and I start to play with the drum rhythm, and I start to sing phonetically. I make noises. I will just go outside my head with music, with singing. And it hasn't got to be words. It has to be sound. And you're away. And you go like, okay, where's this leading me? And then other times I can just be reading a book and I can see a title and I just write that title down and say, that is a wonderful picture. I need to write something around that. Sometimes I'll just do the music and I'll be playing it in the car and suddenly I'm singing a melody on top of what we've done. It starts from all different ways. With Bernie, it was a methodical way. The lyrics were already written. They came to me. And he's such a rhythmic writer and such a writer of understanding how songs progress. You basically put them up on your music stand, and you can usually tell when you look at a lyric, where it's coming from. When we built this city, I could see that Bernie was pushing in quite a contemporary and aggressive way. I don't know if he would have given that lyric to Elton. It definitely shows signs that he was putting an edge into his writing, knowing that he was working with me. And so, yes, with Bernie, it was like, when's the next lyric coming? I've still got a folder with loads of lyrics in that he gave me, because we were just writing a song every 3 days. But then on my own, it's a matter of what pulls me towards the writing process. But usually it's putting my hands down onto a keyboard or a guitar and rambling like a madman. You know, you just go for it. And sometimes it can be a rhythm on a drum machine. I always classed myself quite lucky that I came through the 80s, because we learned about technology as writers. You know, we learned how drum machines work. We learned now, because we were technically ahead at those times, how to use Pro Tools now and all the different software. And I did notice that through the 80s, the songwriters that understood technology and who could get around the studio on their own, you know, program a track, understand what reverbs were, mix a track. I think those were the writers that survived. You know, there was that era when a lot of the songwriters and performers that were based on acoustic guitars and a piano, they were being left behind. So I do feel very fortunate that I came through the 80s when you're able to plug a drum machine in it and you have an orchestra at your hands with a synthesizer. And I think that's what gave me such longevity. I could go right through the 80s, the 90s, and up to now, still with a sense that I understood what the technology was doing to music in the studios. The writers that didn't bother to learn that, in many cases struggled, and many of the artists did as well. So I think being an all-rounder, for me personally, was a huge strength. I could jump in into many colors, into many clothes straight away, and understand what the engineer did, what the vocalist did, what the horn players did, and how on tape how we dealt with it, and now on digital how we dealt with it. So I think that was just such a lucky time, you know. If you were an artist that came through just based on acoustic guitars, when the 80s hit, it was a very difficult time for them. So being an all-rounder seemed to be a very useful thing for me.
Now, you earlier said how you love albums, and so when you do your solo albums, do you know how you want the songs to go? Because that was the one thing you love about albums, is there's an order of a song and there's a certain rhythm, and you enjoy that. You know, I have Amazon Alexa, and I pay for the unlimited music, and I'll just listen to some albums. And you know, I was listening to Lou Reed, Transformer, the other day, and it's
great album.
Yeah, it's so great because the songs just go together, even though they're so different. Yeah. For you, when you put your albums together, do you follow that? Do you sit there and go, okay, I really need to move these around until it sounds right to you, or you just say, I'm putting these?
Yeah, absolutely. That's the Bible to me. You know, that's what an album is. It's a movie. It starts. There's a middle. There's a beginning. There's an end. There's a road to take. There's an emotional context to it. It's like listening to a great classical concert. It's very, very important how you take the person on the journey. And I spent ages on that. Yes, ever so important. It's a book, you know, it's a chapters. You don't just throw it all together and hope that it sticks together. You can miss the highlights of what's really, really important and that's why I live a long time with albums as I'm putting them together. I'm still quite long on that, because I think, you know, you get a sense of where the journey's going to be, where the road's going to be. And I'm really quite quick at knowing, after I've written 15 songs, of saying, I know this is the last song on the album. I know this is a third way in, and this is definitely the beginning. And this could be song 6 or 7. This is the beauty of albums, which we tend to have lost now, because, as you say, we just stream. And so blocks of songs together, which to me are still so important. If you listen to Hard Day's Night, you know it's there. You know it's happening there. You know there's a thing. It's not just one song after another. There's an entity, and we have lost that because of technology. You know, technology is good, but it leads us fast to some directions, but also leaves behind some things which were quite golden and quite special. And so I spend a very long time on the thematic sense of an album, because I still I like to hear different tracks all playing against each other and listen to the radio. Fine, great, but every now and then I'm looking for that artist. You know, I want to hear what how Coldplay saw their whole thing. I still want to hear how Paul McCartney structures his album. I still want to hear how the classics writers like Elton how they see their music. And as you say, with Lou Reed and Transformer, it's not just thrown together. That is put together like a building. That's a different floor every time you go up. There's a level. And it's a great skill in knowing. If a person loves your music, if they love the artistry, like a Joni Mitchell or whatever, they will sit with that music and they will want to engage with the spirit of the writer and the artist and the vocalist. They'll want to go into that forest with that person. So I know it's not the era of the album, but once it's ingrained in me, I cannot never do that. It's the way I see things. I can almost be writing 30 songs, and out of those 30 songs, I'll listen to them. They're all different styles, but I go, that one works with that one works with that one doesn't, that one works with that. You can feel a colour, just like a lady will get dressed up, how she sees her shoes, how she sees her dress, how she sees her hair. That's the same way I see an album.
Now, are you writing for anybody else these days, or you're just really concentrating on your own?
I'm writing for anybody who wants to cut any of my songs. They're all here if you want them. No, I'm concentrating mainly on I'm under high speed at the moment because I've got 5 albums going on at the same time. I'd have thought I would have slowed down, but no, I'm writing mainly for myself. I think other people could cut the hell out of these songs I'm writing because, I'm a child of the 70s, so one of my songs will sound, like James Brown, and another one will sound like U2 or Coldplay or whatever's going on there. It's all, it's the way you interpret it. So I don't write in one particular style. What makes it my style is I sing it, and that's my voice that makes it that, I suppose. But I've got about 5 albums on the go. One very, very big record has taken me 2 to 3 years because I found some very, very special songs about 2 years ago for different reasons. Musicians came around me again that were on the House of Stone and Light record. And I had a drummer that played on the House of Stone and Light called Jimmy Copley, and I prepared these songs thinking he would play on them again, and unfortunately he passed away. But during that period, the songs I were writing were very, very spiritually charged. And a lot of the musicians that were back with me then came about again. Jack Hughes, Neil Taylor, the Blue Nile guys, everybody seemed to appear. Even my old drummer, Trevor Thornton from Q-Phil, he was there. So suddenly this became a live record, and it's become quite a glorious, big record, which I'm actually working on now as we speak to you. I've just come away from the studio, and Ray Parker has played guitar on 2 of the tracks. We got together again after reuniting because of Ghostbusters. We've got Gary Meek playing some amazing horns on a song called Little Bird, which is ever so funky. And then we've got, I just had a South African choir sing to the last song on this album. So this is a massive project for me because I haven't done this for many years, where all the musicians or the live players or the drums or the orchestration. In between that, I've written a very, very intimate record that I'm very excited about. It comes out in September called Fugitive Pieces, and that's just me at the piano for 3 weeks. I just wrote a song a day, and my life came out onto that record, and my manager wants that out for sure because it's very, very intimate and different. And then around the back of that, I'm doing another instrumental record because I made an instrumental record last year, and there's a reggae album and there's a folk album. So, yes, it's going on faster than it did before in the past, but I'm very lucky that I'm still creative, so few things bubbling all at the same time. I don't think I've ever had so much going on at the same time. And we're still, a lot of my songs are being used for movies, and I'm writing songs for my first band again, Q-Phil, because Brian Fairweather and Trevor Thornton from the band are back with me. And there was news of maybe possibly our first Q-Phil record was going to be brought out again because of what it was in the 80s. It was a sort of seminal kind of record at that time. And so we're back doing that as well. So many hats, but it keeps me alive, and no doubt about that.
It's awesome, man. I want to thank you for taking the time to talk with me today, Martin. It was a pleasure.
Thanks, mate. Thanks.
And
I appreciate that.
Your webpage is martinpage.com. And people, go to the webpage, listen to his music.
The best thing to go to, Steve, best thing to go to is because I've just got basically a page up for that which just guides people. But my Facebook page is run by a lady called Vanessa, and she's been a fan for years, and she keeps that bubbling. So if people really want to see what's going on now and where I'm rolling, it'd be best to go to Facebook, my page at Facebook.
So people, go to Facebook. But you know what you can do? You can go to my website and listen to past episodes. I have over 700 of them at coopertalk.net. Email me, cooper@coopertalk.net. Follow me on Twitter at CooperTalk, Instagram at CooperTalk1. Remember, I'm Steve Cooper. I'm only as hip as my guests. Don't forget, drink your water, eat your vegetables, take your vitamins, and I'll talk to you next time.